I stared at the email on my laptop screen in complete disbelief. The words blurred together as my hands trembled slightly. As of now, you're no longer with this company. Figure out how to get home yourself. No phone call, no conversation. Just a cold, calculated message from Marcus Peterson, my boss of 5 years. I was sitting in a cramped airport hotel room in Denver, 2,000 miles from my Connecticut home, having just finished a successful client presentation for the company. The dismissal felt like a slap across the face after years of dedication. But as the initial shock wore off, something clicked in my mind. I typed back a simple response. Thank you for letting me know. Because I suddenly remembered one crucial thing they had completely forgotten. Next morning would change everything. The fluorescent hotel lights buzzed overhead as I closed my laptop and leaned back in the uncomfortable desk chair. My reflection in the dark window showed a 32-year-old woman who had just lost everything she had worked for. Yet somehow I felt calmer than I should have. Andrea Sullivan, senior marketing analyst, terminated without cause while representing Peterson Marketing Solutions at their biggest client meeting of the year. 5 years. That's how long I had poured my soul into that company. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and sacrificed weekends. 5 years of believing Marcus Peterson when he said we were building something special together. My performance reviews had been stellar, my client relationships rock solid, and my marketing campaigns had generated millions in revenue for the firm. But 6 months ago, everything changed when I accidentally stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. It was a Thursday evening in March. I had returned to the office to grab some files I forgot, thinking the building would be empty. The security guard waved me through with a tired smile. As I walked past Marcus's corner office, I noticed the light was still on. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear his voice along with someone else's. I was about to knock and say hello when I heard numbers that stopped me dead in my tracks. The Henderson account shows $250,000 in advertising spend, but we only actually placed ads worth $120,000, Marcus was saying in a low voice. The difference goes into the secondary account just like we discussed. My heart hammered against my ribs. Through the crack in the door, I could see Marcus sitting across from Jennifer Walsh, our HR director. She was nodding slowly, her face pale under the desk lamp's glow. What about the quarterly audit? Jennifer asked nervously. Beth's handling the books. She knows what numbers to show them, Marcus replied with a dismissive wave. The clients get their basic service, they're happy enough, and what they don't know won't hurt them. I backed away from the door as quietly as possible, my mind racing. This wasn't just poor business practice. This was theft, embezzlement. Marcus was stealing from our clients, and Jennifer was helping him cover it up. Over the following weeks, I became hyper-aware of every financial discrepancy, every hushed conversation, every time Marcus asked me to revise a budget report. I started noticing patterns that had been invisible before. Client invoices that didn't match campaign deliverables, expense reports that seemed inflated, meetings I wasn't invited to despite being the senior analyst on those accounts. I knew I had to document everything, but I also knew how dangerous this knowledge was. Marcus Peterson wasn't just my boss. He was a connected businessman with relationships throughout the state. His family had owned Peterson Marketing for 3 generations before he took over. Going up against him would be like David facing Goliath, except David would be unemployed and probably blacklisted from the industry. But I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. So I started photographing documents when I worked late. I recorded conversations on my phone when Marcus discussed client budgets. I made copies of financial reports before they were revised by Beth Rodriguez, our nervous accountant who always looked like she was about to cry these days. I saved everything to a secure cloud storage account that only I had access to. The evidence was damning. Over the course of 4 months, I had documented systematic theft of client funds totaling over $2 million. Marcus had been redirecting advertising budget money into personal accounts while delivering substandard services to trusting clients. 3 weeks ago, I had quietly consulted with Sarah Thompson, an employment attorney in Hartford. Sarah had listened to my story with growing amazement and told me I was sitting on a potential whistleblower case that could not only protect my job, but could also result in criminal charges for Marcus. Document everything, she had advised, but be careful. People who steal this much money don't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens their operation. Those words proved prophetic. Yesterday morning, Marcus had called me into his office for what he said was an important assignment. He was sending me to Denver to handle the Rockwell Industries presentation, our biggest potential client. It seemed like recognition for my hard work, maybe even a promotion opportunity. Now I realized it was a setup. He had discovered I knew about the embezzlement. Maybe someone had seen me photographing documents, or perhaps he noticed I was asking too many questions about budget discrepancies. Either way, he had sent me across the country specifically so he could fire me while I was stranded and vulnerable. But Marcus had made one critical error. In his rush to eliminate the threat I posed, he had handed me the perfect wrongful termination case. Firing a potential whistleblower while they were on company business, leaving them stranded without transportation, and doing it through a hostile email rather than proper procedures, Sarah Thompson was going to have a field day with this. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. Andrea, how did the Denver meeting go? Sarah, I need to see you as soon as I get back to Connecticut. Marcus just fired me via email while I'm still on the business trip he sent me on. There was a long pause. He did what? Terminated me effective immediately. Told me to figure out my own way home. I think he found out I know about the embezzlement. That idiot just handed us a federal case on a silver platter, Sarah said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. Andrea, do you still have all that evidence? Every single document. Photos, recordings, financial records. It's all secure. Good. Don't touch anything else at this point. Get yourself home however you need to keep all your receipts, and we'll deal with Mr. Peterson when you're back on safe ground. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of that sterile hotel room and felt something I hadn't experienced in months' hope. Marcus thought he was destroying my career, but he had actually just freed me to destroy his. The irony was beautiful. By trying to silence me, he had just triggered the very thing he feared most. The alarm on my phone jolted me awake at 6 a.m. I had barely slept, my mind churning through everything I knew about Marcus's criminal enterprise. As I got ready for my flight home, I mentally organized the evidence that would soon turn his world upside down. The Henderson Industries account was where it all started. Marcus had been billing them $300,000 per quarter for comprehensive digital marketing services. According to my documentation, he was actually providing about 40% of those services while pocketing the difference. The fake invoices were works of art detailed enough to pass casual inspection, but missing the depth that a forensic accountant would spot immediately. But Henderson was just the tip of the iceberg. As I dug deeper over those months, I discovered he was running the same scam on at least 12 other major clients. Riverside Manufacturing thought they were paying for premium social media management and were actually getting basic posts scheduled by an intern. Mountain View Technologies believed their $200,000 annual SEO campaign was comprehensive when Marcus was actually using a $20 per month automated tool. The most heartbreaking case was Golden Years Retirement Community. These were elderly folks who had trusted their life savings to advertise their assisted living facility. Marcus charged them $80,000 for what he called a senior-focused multimedia campaign. What they actually got was a handful of Facebook posts and a basic website that looked like it was built in 2005. I had photos of the real contracts versus the delivered work. I had recorded Marcus bragging to Jennifer about how easy marks like retirement communities were because they didn't understand digital marketing enough to question his invoices. I had bank statements showing the diverted funds flowing into accounts under Marcus's control. But perhaps the most damning evidence involved Beth Rodriguez, our accountant. Poor Beth was 29 years old, supporting her disabled mother and trying to pay off student loans. Marcus had slowly drawn her into the conspiracy by starting with small favors. "Just adjust this line item slightly," he would say. "Round this number up to make the budget cleaner." Over time, the requests became more serious. Forge a signature here, backdate a document there, create an invoice for services that were never provided. I had recorded a conversation where Marcus explicitly threatened Beth's job if she didn't cooperate with falsifying quarterly reports. "Your mother's medical bills aren't going to pay themselves," he had said with casual cruelty. "You want to keep this job, you do what I need you to do. Ask too many questions and I'll make sure you never work in accounting again." The system was ingenious in its simplicity. Marcus would inflate client invoices by 30 to 50%. The extra money would be funneled through a web of subcontractor payments to companies that existed only on paper. Those shell companies would then transfer the money to accounts Marcus controlled. The clients received just enough service to keep them satisfied, and the missing money disappeared into Marcus's personal empire. During the flight back to Connecticut, I called my best friend Emma Carter. Emma and I had been close since college, and she was the only person I had confided in about what I suspected was happening at work. "How did the presentation go?" Emma asked cheerfully. "He fired me." "What are you kidding me?" I explained the email, the stranded situation, everything. Emma listened in stunned silence. "Andrea, this is insane. You can't let him get away with this." "I'm not planning to. Remember that attorney I told you about? I'm meeting with her as soon as I land." "Good. You've been carrying this stress for months. I've watched you lose weight, lose sleep, second-guessing every decision. It's time to fight back." Emma was right. The knowledge of Marcus's crimes had been eating me alive. Every day I went to work knowing I was complicit through my silence. Every client meeting felt like a betrayal. Every paycheck felt like blood money. But I had also been terrified. Marcus Peterson wasn't just wealthy, he was connected. His family had deep roots in Connecticut business circles. He served on charity boards, played golf with city council members, and his wife hosted fundraisers for local politicians. Going up against him meant going up against an entire network of power and influence. The plane touched down in Hartford at 3 p.m. I took a taxi straight to Sarah Thompson's law office in downtown Hartford. Sarah was a sharp woman in her late 30s who specialized in employment law and whistleblower protection cases. Her office walls were covered with framed news articles about corporate fraud cases she had won. "Andrea," she said, standing up from her desk as her assistant showed me in, "you look tired. It's been a rough 24 hours. Tell me everything that happened from the beginning." I walked her through the entire timeline. Marcus's increasingly suspicious behavior over the past 6 months. The overheard conversation that started my investigation, the systematic documentation of evidence, the sudden business trip to Denver, the cold termination email. Sarah took notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me seriously. "Andrea, this is much bigger than a simple wrongful termination case. What you've uncovered could be federal criminal fraud. We're talking about wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and possibly tax evasion. This is serious felony territory." "What does that mean for me?" "It means you're not just an employee who got fired unfairly. You're a federal whistleblower who exposed a major criminal enterprise. There are specific laws that protect people in your situation and serious penalties for anyone who retaliates against you." Sarah pulled out a thick folder and opened it on her desk. I've been doing some preliminary research since you first contacted me. Peterson Marketing Solutions has been on the radar of several regulatory agencies. There have been complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau. The State Attorney General's office has received reports about questionable billing practices. What you've documented could be the key that unlocks a much larger investigation. My hands trembled slightly as the full magnitude of the situation hit me. There's something else, Sarah continued. I made some inquiries through my contacts in federal law enforcement. Marcus Peterson has been under informal surveillance by the FBI for potential tax fraud. Your evidence about the embezzlement could be exactly what they need to move forward with a full investigation. The room seemed to spin around me. The FBI... Andrea, you're holding evidence of a multi-million-dollar criminal conspiracy. This isn't just about getting your job back or winning a lawsuit. This is about bringing down a sophisticated fraud operation that has been stealing from clients for who knows how long. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Ms. Sullivan, this is Agent Rachel Morrison with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to speak with you as soon as possible regarding Peterson Marketing Solutions. Please call me at this number. Marcus had no idea what he had just triggered. 2 days later, I sat in a sterile conference room at the FBI field office in New Haven, staring across a table at Agent Rachel Morrison. She was a woman in her early 40s, with steel-gray eyes and an intensity that made me understand why criminals feared federal investigators. Ms. Sullivan, thank you for coming in, she said, opening a thick file folder. Your attorney briefed me on your situation. What you've uncovered could be crucial to a case we've been building for almost a year. My stomach dropped. A year. Marcus Peterson first appeared on our radar during a routine audit of nonprofit organizations. His company was handling marketing for several charities, and there were discrepancies in how funds were being used. We started looking deeper into his business practices. Agent Morrison slid a photograph across the table. It showed Marcus shaking hands with a distinguished older man in a suit. Do you recognize this person? I studied the image. No, I've never seen him before. That's Vincent Caruso. He runs a network of shell companies that help businesses hide income from tax authorities. We believe Peterson Marketing is part of a larger money laundering operation that spans multiple states. The room felt like it was closing in around me. Money laundering. The embezzlement you documented is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Caruso's organization helps corrupt businessmen move stolen money through legitimate-looking transactions. They take a percentage and make the rest appear clean. Agent Morrison opened another folder and spread out financial documents that looked frighteningly similar to the ones I had photographed. Peterson has been systematically stealing from clients for at least 3 years, but instead of just keeping the money in local accounts, he's been sending it through Caruso's network. The funds get laundered through fake consulting fees, inflated vendor payments, and bogus marketing expenses. She pointed to a bank statement showing a transfer of $420,000. This payment supposedly went to a web development company in Nevada. That company doesn't exist. The money actually went to Caruso, who took his cut and sent the remainder to offshore accounts controlled by Peterson. My hands felt cold as I processed what she was telling me. How much money are we talking about? Based on what we know so far, at least $12 million over the past 3 years. But that's just what we can prove. The actual amount is probably much higher. The number hit me like a physical blow. $12 million. Stolen from clients who trusted Marcus with their businesses, their dreams, their life savings. Ms. Sullivan, we need your help, Agent Morrison continued. The evidence you've collected is exactly what we need to prove the connection between Peterson and Caruso's organization. But we need more. What kind of more? We need you to go back to work. I stared at her in disbelief. He fired me. Remember, your wrongful termination is actually perfect cover. We want you to appeal the firing. Claim it was a misunderstanding. Ask for your job back. My heart hammered against my ribs. You want me to go back there knowing what I know? Agent Morrison's expression softened slightly. I know it's a lot to ask, but Peterson is planning to run. Our intelligence suggests he's going to liquidate his remaining assets and flee the country within the next 72 hours. This is our only chance to catch him before he disappears forever. She slid a small device across the table. It looked like an ordinary USB drive. This is a recording device. It's completely undetectable and has a range of about 50 feet. We need you to get Peterson on record admitting to the embezzlement and discussing his escape plans. I picked up the device with trembling fingers. What if he finds out? What if he realizes I'm working with you? Ms. Sullivan, I won't lie to you. There is risk involved. Peterson has already shown he's willing to retaliate against people who threaten him. If he discovers you're cooperating with federal investigators, he might become dangerous. The word dangerous hung in the air like a threat. But, Agent Morrison continued, you won't be alone. We'll have agents positioned around the building. You'll have a panic signal and we'll be monitoring everything in real time. I thought about Harold Jenkins, a 70-year-old man I had met earlier that morning. Agent Morrison had arranged for me to speak with some of Marcus's victims before making my decision about cooperating. Harold had invested his entire retirement savings with a financial planning firm that Marcus was supposedly marketing. The firm was legitimate, but Marcus had been skimming money from their advertising budget while providing virtually no services. When the firm couldn't attract new clients because of the inadequate marketing, they went bankrupt. Harold lost everything. I worked for 43 years. Harold had told me, tears in his eyes. I trusted them with my future and they stole it from me. I'm 70 years old and I'm working as a grocery bagger because I can't afford to retire. Then there was Maria Santos, who owned a small restaurant in Bridgeport. She had hired Peterson Marketing to help her expand her business after the pandemic. Marcus charged her $50,000 for a comprehensive marketing campaign that would supposedly bring in new customers and delivery orders. I took out a second mortgage on my house to pay for that marketing, Maria had said. He promised me I would double my revenue in 6 months. Instead, I got a basic website and some Facebook posts. My restaurant is closing next month. My family is losing everything. Harold, Maria, and dozens of other victims were counting on someone to stop Marcus before he could hurt anyone else. Before he could take their stolen money and disappear to some country without extradition treaties. Agent Morrison! I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. What do I need to do? She smiled for the first time since I had met her. First, we're going to teach you how to be a federal informant. Then we're going to bring down a criminal empire. As I left the FBI office that evening, I called Sarah Thompson to update her on the situation. Andrea, are you sure about this? Working undercover for the FBI isn't something you can just change your mind about once it starts? Sarah, I keep thinking about that man, Harold. He's 70 years old and working at a grocery store because Marcus stole his retirement. If I don't help stop this, Marcus will take that money and run, and all those victims will never see justice. I understand the moral argument, but I need you to understand the legal reality. Once you become a federal informant, you're a witness in a major criminal case. Your life is going to change permanently. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Marcus's cruel email leaving me stranded in Denver like I was disposable trash. I thought about his smug voice bragging about how easy it was to steal from elderly clients. I thought about Beth Rodriguez trapped in his conspiracy because she couldn't afford to lose her job. Yes, I said, I'm ready to do this. What I didn't know was that Marcus had already discovered my cooperation with the FBI, and he was planning something that would put my life in immediate danger. The next morning, I stood outside the Peterson Marketing Solutions building with my heart hammering so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. The FBI recording device was hidden inside a button on my blazer, completely invisible, but somehow feeling like a neon sign announcing my deception. Agent Morrison's voice crackled softly in my nearly invisible earpiece. Remember, Andrea, stay calm and natural. We need him to believe you're genuinely trying to get your job back. I pushed through the glass doors and approached the reception desk. Kelly, the young receptionist, looked up in surprise. Andrea, I thought you were in Denver. I was. I'm back now. I kept my voice steady. Is Marcus available? I need to speak with him about a misunderstanding. Kelly's face showed confusion. A misunderstanding. About my employment status. There seems to have been some confusion while I was traveling. She picked up her phone and dialed Marcus's extension. Mr. Peterson, Andrea Sullivan is here to see you. She says there's been some confusion about her job. I couldn't hear his response, but Kelly's expression grew uncomfortable. Okay, I'll tell her. She hung up and looked at me apologetically. He says to go up to his office. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt like it lasted forever. My palms were sweating, and I had to resist the urge to touch the recording device hidden in my blazer. As the doors opened, I saw several of my former colleagues at their desks. They all stared at me with expressions ranging from surprise to pity. Janet Murphy, our office manager, approached me with concern written across her face. Andrea, honey, what are you doing here? Marcus told everyone you had been terminated for cause. For cause? The words hit me like a slap. What reason did he give? Janet glanced around nervously. He said you had been falsifying expense reports and that the Denver trip revealed serious ethical violations. My blood boiled. Not only had Marcus fired me unjustly, but he was now actively destroying my reputation with lies. Janet, that's completely false. I've never falsified anything in my life. I know, sweetie. None of us believed it. You're the most honest person in this office. Agent Morrison's voice whispered in my ear. Good. This is evidence of defamation. Keep going. Marcus's office door was open, and he was sitting behind his mahogany desk with a satisfied smirk on his face. At 55, he still had the arrogant bearing of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his expensive suit probably cost more than most people made in a month. Andrea, he said without looking up from his computer. I thought I made myself clear in my email. Marcus, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding, I said, stepping into his office. I'm here to discuss the situation and hopefully clear up whatever confusion led to my termination. He finally looked at me, his blue eyes cold and calculating. There's no confusion. Your services are no longer required. But why my performance reviews have been excellent. The Denver presentation went perfectly. Rockwell Industries is ready to sign a 3-year contract worth $2.7 million. Marcus's expression shifted slightly. The mention of money always got his attention. That contract is company property, he said. Any agreements you negotiated belong to Peterson Marketing. Of course. I never suggested otherwise. That's why I'm confused about the termination. Wouldn't it make more sense to keep me on to manage that account? Agent Morrison's voice in my ear. Perfect. Keep pushing about the financial aspects. Marcus stood up and walked to his office window, looking down at the parking lot. Andrea, let me be very clear. Your employment was terminated for cause. Attempting to argue about it won't change anything. What cause, Marcus? What exactly am I accused of? He turned back to me with a cruel smile. Expense report irregularities, unauthorized access to confidential files, potential theft of company property. Each false accusation felt like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain calm. Those are very serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them? I have everything I need, because I have documentation of every expense I've ever submitted, and I've never accessed any files I wasn't authorized to see. If you're making these claims, I'd like to see your evidence. Marcus's jaw tightened. He was clearly frustrated that I wasn't simply accepting his lies and leaving quietly. Fine, he said, walking back to his desk. Since you want to do this the hard way, let me explain something to you. He opened his laptop and turned the screen toward me. On it was a fabricated expense report with my forged signature claiming reimbursement for a weekend trip to Boston that had never happened. This is just one example of your fraudulent behavior. Marcus said. I have at least 6 similar reports showing a pattern of theft. I stared at the screen in shock. The document was sophisticated, but it was completely fake. The signature wasn't even a good forgery of my handwriting. Marcus, this is fabricated. I never submitted this report, and I never took that trip. Your word against documented evidence, Andrea. Who do you think people are going to believe? Agent Morrison's voice. He's digging his own grave. Keep him talking. Why would you create fake evidence against me? I asked. What could I have possibly done to deserve this? Marcus leaned back in his chair, and for a moment his mask slipped. You ask too many questions. You notice things that aren't your business. You make people uncomfortable. What kind of things? Budget discrepancies, client billing irregularities. You've been poking around in areas that don't concern you. My heart raced as he essentially admitted to the very crimes I had been investigating. Are you saying I was fired for doing my job too well? I'm saying you were fired for being a problem. What kind of problem? Marcus stood up abruptly and walked around his desk until he was standing directly in front of me. His proximity felt threatening, and I had to resist the urge to back away. The kind of problem that creates liability for the company. The kind of problem that asks inconvenient questions about things that are none of her business. Like what? Like why client budgets don't always match delivered services. Like why certain vendor payments seem inflated. Like why some financial reports get revised after you've seen them. I couldn't believe he was actually admitting to this. Either he was incredibly arrogant, or he was planning something that made my knowledge irrelevant. Marcus, are you telling me I was fired because I noticed financial irregularities? I'm telling you that employees who can't mind their own business don't last long at this company. Agent Morrison's voice was urgent in my ear. Andrea, get out of there! Now! But before I could move, Marcus reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small electronic device. My blood turned to ice as I realized what it was. You know, Andrea, it's funny how people think they're so clever with modern technology. He held up a radio frequency detector, and it was beeping rapidly as he pointed it in my direction. This little gadget detects wireless transmissions. Recording devices, listening equipment, hidden cameras. Amazing what you can buy online these days. The room spun around me as I realized my cover was blown. Marcus knew I was wearing a wire. He had known from the moment I walked into his office. Did you really think you could just walk in here and record me confessing to crimes, Andrea? Did you think I was that stupid? I tried to back toward the door, but Marcus stepped between me and the exit. The FBI contacted you, didn't they? They told you all about their little investigation and you agreed to help them. My voice came out as barely a whisper. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you do. Agent Rachel Morrison, Federal Task Force on White-Collar Crime. She's been sniffing around my business for months. Marcus walked back to his desk and picked up his phone. Jennifer, come to my office immediately and bring the security guards. He hung up and smiled at me with genuine malice. You see, Andrea, I've been preparing for this moment for quite some time. I know all about the FBI investigation. I know about your little collection of evidence. And I know exactly how to make you the villain in this story. Within minutes, Jennifer Walsh and 2 security guards entered the office. Jennifer looked nervous, but the guards appeared ready for trouble. Gentlemen, Marcus said calmly. Ms. Sullivan has just attempted to illegally record a private conversation using hidden surveillance equipment. She's also been involved in embezzling company funds and is now trying to frame innocent employees for her crimes. That's completely false, I protested. Marcus opened his laptop again and showed the screen to the security guards. As you can see, we have documented evidence of her fraudulent expense reports. She's been stealing from the company for months. One of the guards, a large man in his 50s, looked at me with disgust. Ma'am, you need to come with us. No, you don't understand. He's the one who's been stealing. I have evidence that he's embezzled millions of dollars from clients. Marcus laughed coldly. Really? Andrea, you're going to claim that I, the owner of this company, have been stealing from my own clients. That's your defense. He turned to Jennifer. Call the police. Tell them we've discovered an employee theft ring and that the perpetrator has just attempted to gather evidence to cover her tracks. As Jennifer reached for her phone, I heard Agent Morrison's voice crackling urgently in my earpiece. Federal agents are moving in. Stay calm and don't resist anyone. Suddenly, the office door burst open and 3 FBI agents in bulletproof vests stormed into the room with their weapons drawn. Federal Bureau of Investigation, everyone on the ground now! Marcus's confident expression evaporated as he realized his plan had just collapsed around him. Marcus Peterson, Agent Morrison announced as she entered behind the tactical team. You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and witness intimidation. As the agents handcuffed Marcus and began reading him his rights, he looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, Andrea. Even if they convict me, I've made sure your life is ruined. I have information about you that will destroy your reputation forever. Agent Morrison looked at him with disgust. Mr. Peterson, I'd suggest you worry more about your own reputation. You're looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. As they led him away, I collapsed into one of his office chairs, my entire body shaking with adrenaline and relief. The most dangerous part of my journey was over, but I was about to learn that Marcus's final threat wasn't an empty one. The FBI agents were still processing the crime scene in Marcus's office when Agent Morrison pulled me aside. Her expression was grim, and I could tell something was very wrong. Andrea, we need to talk privately. She led me to an empty conference room down the hall, while federal agents continued photographing documents and seizing computer equipment. Through the windows, I could see my former colleagues being interviewed by investigators. The entire office building had been transformed into a crime scene. What Marcus said about having information that could destroy your reputation, Agent Morrison began. We think he wasn't bluffing. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? During his arrest, Peterson claimed he had evidence that you were actually the mastermind behind the entire embezzlement scheme. He says he has documents proving you set up the shell companies and forged his signature on fraudulent transactions. I stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible. I didn't even know about the embezzlement until 6 months ago. We know that, but Peterson has been planning this frame-up for weeks. He's created an elaborate false narrative that portrays you as a disgruntled employee who embezzled millions and then tried to pin the blame on your innocent boss when you got caught. Agent Morrison opened a folder and showed me photocopied documents. These are forged contracts with your signature authorizing payments to fake vendor companies. This is a falsified email chain showing you supposedly coordinating with Vincent Caruso's money laundering network. This is a fabricated bank statement showing deposits into an account that was opened using your personal information. Each document was a work of criminal art. The signatures looked authentic enough to fool a casual observer. The email addresses used variations of my name. The bank statements showed transactions that would be devastating if anyone believed they were real. How is this possible? Peterson has been planning to frame you since he first realized you were suspicious of his activities. He's had months to create this false evidence. The documents are sophisticated enough that they could potentially fool a jury if we didn't have the real evidence proving your innocence. I felt sick to my stomach. So even though you know the truth, he could still destroy my life. There's more, Agent Morrison said grimly. Peterson's attorney has already filed a motion claiming prosecutorial misconduct. They're arguing that the FBI coerced an innocent employee into fabricating evidence against her boss to cover her own crimes. The room seemed to spin around me. Can they do that? They can try. Peterson's family has deep pockets and excellent legal representation. His strategy is to muddy the waters enough to create reasonable doubt about who the real criminal is. Agent Morrison sat down across from me with a serious expression. Andrea, I need you to understand what you're facing. Peterson isn't just fighting criminal charges. He's trying to completely destroy your credibility and reputation. Even if we win the case, the false accusations could follow you for the rest of your life. What can we do to stop him? We fight back with the truth. Your recorded conversations from today are crucial evidence. When Peterson admitted to firing you for asking inconvenient questions about financial irregularities, he essentially confessed to the cover-up. She pulled out a small recording device. This contains his admission that he revised financial reports after you saw them, that client budgets didn't match delivered services, and that vendor payments were inflated. Combined with your documented evidence from the past 6 months, we can prove he's been running a systematic fraud operation. Agent Morrison's phone buzzed, and she answered it with a frown. Morrison here. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but her expression grew increasingly concerned. When did this happen? How did they get access to the evidence locker? Are you sure nothing was tampered with? She hung up and looked at me with alarm. There's been a problem. Someone attempted to break into the FBI evidence storage facility where we're keeping your documented proof of Peterson's crimes. What? How is that possible? We don't know yet, but it means Peterson's people are actively trying to destroy the evidence that proves your innocence and his guilt. My phone rang and I saw it was Sarah Thompson, my attorney. Sarah? Andrea, where are you right now? Still at the office with Agent Morrison. Why? Someone broke into my law office last night. They didn't take anything valuable, but they went through all my files related to your case. They photographed documents and accessed my computer. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. Sarah, they're trying to destroy everything. It gets worse. I just received a call from a reporter at the Hartford Courant. Someone provided them with copies of those forged documents that supposedly prove you're the real embezzler. They're planning to run a story tomorrow morning about the FBI's wrongful prosecution of an innocent businessman. Agent Morrison grabbed the phone from my hand. Ms. Thompson, this is Agent Morrison. Can you identify who contacted the reporter? I could hear Sarah's tinny voice through the speaker. Anonymous tip. But whoever it was had detailed knowledge of the case and sophisticated forged evidence. This is a coordinated attack on Andrea's credibility. After Agent Morrison handed back my phone, I slumped in my chair feeling completely overwhelmed. They're going to destroy me, aren't they? Even if Marcus goes to prison, everyone will think I'm the real criminal. Not if we can help it, Agent Morrison said firmly. Peterson made one critical mistake. In his rush to frame you, he overplayed his hand. What do you mean? The forged documents are too perfect. Real embezzlement leaves messy financial trails because criminals are usually trying to hide their activities quickly. But Peterson's fabricated evidence shows a level of sophistication and long-term planning that doesn't match the timeline of when you supposedly discovered his crimes. Agent Morrison opened her laptop and showed me a forensic analysis report. Our financial crimes unit has already identified several problems with Peterson's false evidence. The signature analysis shows that while the forgeries are good, they have subtle inconsistencies that prove they weren't written by you. The email metadata reveals that the messages were created on Peterson's computer, not yours. And the bank statements reference account numbers that didn't exist during the time periods when you supposedly opened them. So you can prove the documents are fake. We can prove they're fake, but that's not enough. We need to prove that Peterson created them specifically to frame you. That's where his recorded confession becomes crucial. She played back a portion of my wire recording from earlier. Marcus's voice was crystal clear. You ask too many questions. You notice things that aren't your business. You make people uncomfortable. This recording proves that Peterson fired you specifically because you were uncovering his crimes. It establishes motive for him to frame you and shows consciousness of guilt about his own criminal activities. Agent Morrison's phone rang again. She answered with growing irritation. What now? After a brief conversation, she hung up and shook her head. Peterson's attorney is claiming that the recording is inadmissible because it was obtained through coercion. They're arguing that we forced you to wear a wire against your will. That's ridiculous. I volunteered to help. We know that. But Peterson's legal team is throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. They're trying to get all the evidence thrown out on technicalities. I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. Agent Morrison, I'm tired of being a victim. Marcus Peterson has stolen millions of dollars from innocent people. He's tried to frame me for his crimes. He's attempting to destroy evidence and intimidate witnesses. When does this stop? It stops when we put him in prison where he belongs. But Andrea, I need you to understand that this is going to be a long fight. Peterson has resources and connections. He's going to use every dirty trick in the book to avoid accountability. Then we need to fight dirtier than he does. Agent Morrison raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, we stop playing defense and start playing offense. Peterson thinks he's so smart, but he's made mistakes. And I know where to find them. Over the next hour, I walked Agent Morrison through everything I remembered about Marcus's criminal operation. Not just the financial evidence I had already documented, but the personal details that could prove he was the architect of the entire scheme. His private meetings with Vincent Caruso that I had witnessed. His detailed knowledge of offshore banking procedures that he had bragged about during company parties. His casual mentions of clients who would be easy marks because they didn't understand digital marketing. Most importantly, I remembered something that could destroy his attempt to frame me. Agent Morrison Marcus made a huge mistake when he fired me in Denver. How so? He sent that termination email from his personal account, not the company system. And in that email, he revealed specific details about client accounts that only the person running the embezzlement scheme would know. I pulled out my phone and showed her the original termination message. Look at this line. Your access to client financial systems is revoked immediately. But I never had access to client financial systems. My job was marketing analysis, not accounting. The only reason Marcus would mention financial systems is because he knew I had discovered the embezzlement. Agent Morrison's eyes lit up. That's evidence of consciousness of guilt. He revealed his own knowledge of the financial crimes in the very email where he tried to silence you. There's more. He said, figure out how to get home yourself. But according to company policy, employees on business travel are entitled to return transportation regardless of their employment status. The only reason to strand me in Denver was to prevent me from immediately reporting what I knew to authorities. Andrea, this email could be the key to proving Peterson's guilt and your innocence. His own words demonstrate that he fired you specifically because you uncovered his crimes. As we worked through the evidence, I began to feel something I hadn't experienced in months' hope. Marcus Peterson thought he was destroying my life, but he had actually just provided the evidence that would send him to prison and clear my name. The next morning's newspaper would indeed run a story about the Peterson marketing scandal, but it wouldn't be the story Marcus had planned. 6 weeks later, I sat in the witness chair in the federal courthouse in New Haven, looking directly at Marcus Peterson as he sat at the defendant's table. His expensive suit and confident demeanor from that day in his office had been replaced by the hollow look of a man whose world had collapsed around him. The past month and a half had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and personal vindication that I never could have imagined when I first walked into Sarah Thompson's law office. The FBI's investigation had uncovered the full scope of Marcus's criminal empire. Working with Vincent Caruso's money laundering network, he had systematically defrauded clients of over $4.2 million across 3 years. The fake vendor payments, inflated service charges, and completely fictitious marketing campaigns had funded a lifestyle of luxury while his victims struggled with the consequences of his theft. But the human cost was what made the case truly devastating. Harold Jenkins, the 70-year-old grocery bagger, had testified earlier in the week about losing his entire retirement savings. His financial planning firm had gone bankrupt because Marcus's inadequate marketing had failed to attract new clients while secretly draining their advertising budget. I worked every day for 43 years, Harold had told the jury, his voice breaking with emotion. I saved every penny I could, thinking it would be enough for a comfortable retirement. Mr. Peterson took that security away from me. At my age, I'll never be able to recover what he stole. Maria Santos had described watching her restaurant empire crumble after trusting Marcus with a $50,000 marketing investment that produced virtually nothing while enriching his personal accounts. I mortgaged my home to pay for marketing that was supposed to save my business, Maria had testified. Instead, Mr. Peterson's lies cost me everything my family had worked for. My children had to change schools because we lost our house. There had been dozens of similar stories. Elderly clients robbed of their life savings, small business owners bankrupted by Marcus's fraudulent promises, families destroyed by his greed and deception. The prosecution had been methodical in presenting the evidence I had helped gather. Bank records showing diverted funds, email chains revealing the conspiracy with Caruso's organization, recorded conversations where Marcus admitted to the crimes and threatened to frame innocent employees. But perhaps the most damning evidence had been Marcus's own termination email to me. Federal prosecutors had used it to demonstrate his consciousness of guilt and his deliberate attempt to silence a whistleblower who threatened his criminal operation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Assistant U.S. Attorney David Kim had said during his opening statement, Marcus Peterson's own words prove his guilt. When he fired Andrea Sullivan for asking inconvenient questions about financial irregularities, he revealed his knowledge of those irregularities. When he stranded her in Denver to prevent her from reporting his crimes, he showed consciousness of guilt. And when he attempted to frame her with forged documents, he proved the lengths he would go to protect his criminal empire. Marcus's defense attorney had tried desperately to shift blame to me and other employees. They argued that Marcus was a trusting employer who had been deceived by sophisticated criminals working within his organization. But the evidence was overwhelming. My 6 months of careful documentation had provided prosecutors with an airtight case. Every forged signature had been exposed by forensic analysis. Every fake email had been traced back to Marcus's computer. Every fabricated bank statement had been debunked by federal investigators. Now, as I prepared to give my final testimony, I looked at Marcus and saw something I had never seen before: fear. "Ms. Sullivan," Prosecutor Kim said, "please tell the jury about your decision to cooperate with federal investigators." I took a deep breath and began the story I had told so many times over the past weeks. But this time, it wasn't just about legal procedures and evidence documentation. This time, it was about justice for the people Marcus had destroyed. I knew that coming forward would probably cost me my career, I said, looking directly at the jury. Marcus Peterson had connections throughout the business community. He had the resources to destroy my reputation and make sure I never worked in marketing again. Then why did you decide to help the FBI? I thought about Harold Jenkins working at a grocery store at age 70, about Maria Santos losing her family restaurant, about all the victims who had trusted Marcus with their dreams and been betrayed, because staying silent would have made me complicit in his crimes. Every day I didn't speak up was another day he could steal from innocent people. My career didn't matter compared to stopping that. The prosecutor nodded. What did Mr. Peterson say to you during the recorded conversation in his office? He admitted that he had fired me because I was asking inconvenient questions about financial irregularities. He said that employees who couldn't mind their own business didn't last long at his company. He basically confessed that he was covering up crimes and retaliating against anyone who threatened to expose them. How do you respond to the defense's claim that you were the real mastermind behind the embezzlement scheme? I had been preparing for this question for weeks. Your Honor, every piece of evidence in this case proves that Marcus Peterson was the architect of these crimes. My job was marketing analysis. I didn't have access to client financial accounts. I didn't have authority to approve vendor payments. I didn't have the knowledge or connections to set up offshore money laundering operations. I turned to look at Marcus, who was staring at his hands. But Marcus Peterson had all of those things. He had complete financial control over the company. He had relationships with clients that went back years. He had the trust that allowed him to steal millions of dollars without immediate detection. What did you hope to accomplish by becoming a federal witness? Justice for his victims. Marcus Peterson stole the retirement savings of elderly people who trusted him. He bankrupted small businesses that depended on his promises. He destroyed families and ruined lives, all while living in luxury funded by his theft. I paused, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. I wanted to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. The cross-examination by Marcus's defense attorney was brutal, but unsuccessful. They tried to portray me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. They questioned my motives for secretly recording conversations and gathering evidence. They suggested that my cooperation with federal investigators was proof of my own guilt, but they couldn't explain away the mountain of evidence that proved Marcus's crimes. They couldn't justify the forged documents he had created to frame me, and they couldn't dispute his own recorded admissions of guilt. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 18 federal charges: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, tax evasion, witness intimidation. As the judge read each guilty verdict, I watched Marcus's face crumble. His arrogant confidence had been completely destroyed by the weight of justice. But the legal victory was only part of my vindication. During the trial, my story had attracted national media attention as a case study in corporate whistleblowing and employee protection. Major news networks had covered the case as an example of how individual courage could bring down sophisticated white-collar crime. The attention had led to an unexpected job offer from Morrison Ethics Consulting, a prestigious firm that specialized in helping corporations prevent fraud and corruption. They had specifically recruited me because of my experience uncovering and reporting criminal activity. Andrea, the company president, had told me during my interview, "We need people who understand how white-collar crime actually works in the real world. Your experience with the Peterson case gives you credibility that no academic training could provide." My wrongful termination lawsuit against Peterson Marketing had been settled for $1.8 million, including punitive damages for the attempted character assassination. The settlement had included a clause requiring the company to publicly acknowledge that all allegations against me had been false and malicious. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome had been the victim restitution program. Federal prosecutors had seized all of Marcus's assets, including his houses, cars, boats, and offshore accounts. The money would be returned to his victims, giving people like Harold Jenkins and Maria Santos a chance to rebuild their lives. As I left the courthouse that final day, Sarah Thompson walked alongside me toward the parking garage. "Andrea, how does it feel to have this chapter finally closed?" I thought about everything that had happened since that devastating email in Denver. The fear, the investigation, the legal battles, the media scrutiny, the personal growth. "It feels like justice," I said. "Not just for me, but for everyone Marcus hurt." "What's next for you?" I smiled as I thought about my new career helping other companies prevent the kind of fraud that had destroyed so many lives. "Now I get to make sure this never happens to anyone else." 1 year later, I stood at the podium in the auditorium at the University of Connecticut School of Business, looking out at 200 future business leaders who were about to hear a story that would change how they thought about corporate ethics forever. Marcus Peterson had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. His assets had been completely forfeited, and victim restitution had returned over $3.8 million to the people he had defrauded. The shell companies he had used for money laundering had been dismantled, and Vincent Caruso's entire criminal network had been prosecuted in a separate federal case. But the numbers only told part of the story. Harold Jenkins had been able to retire with dignity after receiving full restitution of his stolen savings. He had started a victim advocacy group for elderly people who had been targeted by financial fraud. Andrea's courage saved my life, he had told a reporter last month. If she hadn't spoken up, I would have died working at that grocery store. Maria Santos had reopened her restaurant with the recovered funds and had expanded to 2 additional locations. She had named one of her signature dishes the Truth Teller Special in honor of whistleblowers who risk everything to protect others. Beth Rodriguez had received immunity for her cooperation and had become a certified fraud examiner. She now worked with the FBI to identify financial crimes and had testified in 6 additional cases involving employer coercion. Andrea showed me that doing the right thing is always worth the risk, Beth had said during a recent interview. My own life had been transformed in ways I never could have imagined. Morrison Ethics Consulting had promoted me to senior partner after my first year, and I now led their corporate fraud prevention division. My experience with the Peterson case had made me a nationally recognized expert in whistleblower protection and white-collar crime detection. But the most meaningful part of my new career was the direct impact on preventing future crimes. Over the past year, my team had helped 17 companies identify and stop internal fraud schemes before they could harm clients or employees. We had saved an estimated $12 million in potential losses and had prevented countless victims from experiencing what Harold and Maria had endured. The Peterson case taught me something crucial about corporate crime, I told the students that afternoon. It's not just about money. It's about the trust that holds our economic system together. When business leaders betray that trust, they don't just steal dollars. They steal people's faith in the institutions that are supposed to protect them. I clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of Marcus in handcuffs being led away from the federal courthouse. Marcus Peterson thought he was smarter than everyone around him. He believed his connections and wealth made him untouchable. He assumed that fear would keep potential witnesses silent. The auditorium was completely quiet as students absorbed the gravity of what I was describing. But he made one critical miscalculation. He underestimated the power of individual conscience. He didn't understand that when you give people a choice between complicity and courage, some will always choose courage. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. Ms. Sullivan, weren't you terrified about what might happen to your career if you spoke up? Absolutely, I answered honestly. I was terrified about my career, my reputation, my financial security, everything. Whistleblowing isn't heroic in the moment. It's terrifying. Then what made you do it? I thought about that question which I had been asked hundreds of times over the past year. I realized that my fear of personal consequences was smaller than my fear of becoming the kind of person who stays silent while innocent people are harmed. I had to choose between protecting myself and protecting Marcus's victims. Once I framed it that way, the choice became clear. After my presentation, I was approached by Jennifer Walsh, who had been released from federal prison after serving 8 months for her role in the conspiracy. She looked older and worn down by the experience, but there was something different in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Andrea, I wanted to thank you, she said quietly. Thank me. Jennifer had used her time in prison to earn a degree in nonprofit management. She now worked for a victim assistance organization helping people navigate the legal system after being defrauded. I spent years being part of the problem, she continued. Now I get to spend the rest of my life being part of the solution. That evening, I met Emma Carter for dinner at a small restaurant in Hartford. Emma had been my anchor throughout the entire ordeal, providing emotional support and practical advice when the legal battles seemed overwhelming. I still can't believe how much your life has changed, Emma said as we looked at the menu. A year ago, you were unemployed and facing potential criminal charges. Now you're giving speeches at universities and consulting with Fortune 500 companies. It's surreal, I admitted. But you know what the strangest part is? What? I'm grateful to Marcus Peterson. Emma nearly choked on her water. Grateful? He tried to destroy my life, but he actually freed me to find my true purpose. If he hadn't fired me and tried to frame me, I never would have discovered that I had the courage to stand up to powerful people. I never would have learned that fighting for justice could become a career. So you're saying that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing. I thought about Harold Jenkins working with dignity in his advocacy group, about Maria Santos expanding her restaurant empire, about Beth Rodriguez using her experience to prevent others from being coerced into criminal activity. I'm saying that sometimes when powerful people try to silence you for doing the right thing, they're actually freeing you to become who you were meant to be. Emma raised her glass in a toast. To courage over comfort, and to the truth over convenience, I added. As we sat there celebrating how far we had both come, my phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Morrison. She had been promoted to lead the FBI's new corporate fraud task force, a position created specifically to handle cases like Peterson's. The message was brief but meaningful. Andrea wanted you to know that your Peterson case has become the template for how we investigate complex white-collar crime. Your courage is still protecting people you'll never meet. Thank you for showing us what real integrity looks like. Later that night, I sat in my apartment reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The small dining table where I used to review my evidence files had been replaced by a home office where I now developed fraud prevention strategies for major corporations. The walls that once held newspaper clippings about the Peterson case now displayed certificates of appreciation from victim advocacy groups and business ethics organizations. But the most important change wasn't visible in my surroundings. It was in how I understood my own power to influence the world around me. For most of my career, I had believed that individual employees were powerless against institutional corruption. I had thought that challenging authority meant career suicide and that fighting injustice was someone else's responsibility. Marcus Peterson had taught me how wrong I was about all of that. When he tried to silence me, he had actually discovered my voice. When he tried to intimidate me, he had actually revealed my strength. When he tried to destroy my future, he had actually shown me my true purpose. The lesson wasn't just personal, it was universal. In every organization, there are people who know about wrongdoing but stay silent out of fear. In every community, there are individuals who see injustice but convince themselves that speaking up won't make a difference. In every society, there are citizens who understand that something is wrong but believe they lack the power to change it. The Peterson case proved that assumption false. Individual courage backed by persistence and principle can bring down even the most sophisticated criminal enterprises. Personal integrity combined with institutional support, like whistleblower protection laws, can protect the vulnerable and punish the corrupt. But it requires a choice that most people are afraid to make. The choice to risk personal security for the sake of doing what's right. The choice to stand up to authority when authority is wrong. The choice to trust that justice, while sometimes slow, is ultimately more powerful than corruption. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the speech I would give the next day to a group of corporate executives about implementing fraud prevention programs. I thought about the consultation I would provide to a company that suspected internal embezzlement. I thought about the lives that would be protected because of the systems we were building. And I thought about a simple truth that Marcus Peterson had inadvertently taught me. Sometimes the most devastating professional blow becomes the catalyst for discovering your true purpose. When they try to silence you for doing right, they're actually freeing you to become who you were meant to be. The courage to stand up for what's right, even when it costs everything, ultimately leads to a life worth living. 1 year after Marcus Peterson tried to destroy my career for asking inconvenient questions, I was using those same questions to protect innocent people from the kind of devastation he had inflicted. He had thought he was ending my story when he fired me with that cruel email in Denver. Instead, he had just written the first chapter of a much better one. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between your personal security and doing what you knew was right? What gave you the courage to speak up when it mattered most? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Share this with someone who might need to hear that individual courage really can make a difference. Remember, you have more power to change things than you think you do. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.